The Obsidian Eye of the Sahara. Stop scrolling. Look at the satellite image of Egypt. It's not just a country, it's a stroke of genius. A ribbon of vibrant, fertile green, the Nile Valley, clinging desperately to a river. And surrounding it? Nothing. An endless, crushing 97% expanse of beige and brown. We look at the pyramids and think of power and glory, but the real question is, why did this most resourceful, ingenious civilization in human history stop? Why did they draw a line just a few miles from the river and say, no further? The answer isn't simple geography. It's a forgotten history, a pact broken on the edge of the known world. It's the story of the Obsidian Eye of the Sahara. Part 1. The Cartographer's Dilemma. The year is 1887. The British occupation of Egypt is firmly established, and the relentless heat of Cairo is nothing compared to the intellectual furnace burning within the office of the Royal Geographical Society's lead cartographer, Dr. Alistair Finch. Finch was not a soldier or a politician. He was a scholar obsessed with the blank spaces on the map. His current fixation, the Western Desert, known to the locals as the Libyan Desert, a realm of pure, unadulterated desolation. "They are lying to me, Major," Finch muttered, tracing a thin, almost invisible line on a 17th century Turkish map with his ivory pointer. The man he addressed, Major Miles Kensington, a cynical veteran of desert patrols, merely adjusted his pith helmet. "The locals? Of course they are lying, Finch. They lie about the price of dates, the depth of the wells, and the age of their wives. It's the desert. It makes everyone paranoid." No, not lies of convenience, lies of omission. "Look here." Finch tapped the map. Every map, from Ptolemy to Napoleon's survey, shows the same thing, an abrupt, almost surgical end to settlement. Villages stop, cultivation stops, the very concept of sustained life stops. They cross the line, and all information ceases. They have a dozen words for the sand within the valley, but only one, Bar Belama, the sea without water, for everything beyond. Why? They venture into the desolate mountains for gold, they cross the Sinai, but the west? It's a wall. Major Kensington shrugged, polishing the brass on his revolver. "Because, Finch, it is 3 million square miles of nothing but heat and death. It's not a conspiracy, it's geology. The ancient pharaohs were clever. They knew where to stop." "Perhaps," Finch conceded, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But there is a local legend, a myth the Bedouins whisper around the smallest fires. They speak of an ancient Hut of the Watchers, a hidden city deep within the Great Sand Sea, where the desert was first created." Kensington chuckled, a dry, grating sound like sand shifting over rock. "And I suppose a 400-foot scarab beetle patrols the perimeter? Stick to your tea and trigonometry, Alistair." But Finch could not. He had already found his proof, a single black shard of rock brought back by a disgraced exploration team years earlier. It was obsidian, but unlike any volcanic glass known in the region. Engraved on its surface was a single stylized eye, not the usual Eye of Horus, but something sharper, more predatory, with strange interlocking symbols carved around it. It was too compelling to ignore. Within a month, without official sanction, Finch resigned his post, liquidated his assets, and mounted his own small private expedition. He called it the Eye of Ra Survey, a deliberately misleading name. Its true goal was to find the source of the obsidian and the truth behind the 97%. Part 2. The Oasis That Shouldn't Be. The journey was a brutal baptism by fire. Finch, a man of libraries and ledger books, quickly lost the romanticism of the explorer. His 3 hired guides, seasoned men from the Fayum, were nervous, and the further they traveled west, the quieter they became. They navigated by the sun and the subtle shifts in the towering wind-sheared dunes. They crossed the 29th parallel and saw things that defied the maps. Fields of silica glass, the remnants of an ancient meteor strike. Towering, bizarre rock formations sculpted by eons of wind, resembling colossal, crumbling temples. But the true anomaly came on the 17th day. Exhausted, their water barrels dangerously low, they topped a massive dune only to see it. An oasis. But not a natural one. It was a vast sunken depression, sheltered from the winds, and in the center stood a rectangular lake of impossibly clear blue water, fed not by a subterranean spring, but by a series of perfectly straight, granite-lined aqueducts that snaked out and disappeared into the sand. Surrounding the lake was a city of ruins unlike any other in Egypt. It wasn't the sandstone and limestone of Thebes or the sun-baked mud brick of Saqqara. This was a city built of a smooth, dark volcanic rock, the same obsidian from the shard.
The architecture was unnervingly geometric. No sloping pyramids or familiar obelisks. Instead, the buildings were massive stepped cubes, their faces etched with the same Obsidian Eye motif. Hadneter, the house of God, whispered Abraham, the lead guide, crossing himself with frantic terror. We are too far. The Watchers are here. Finch, though outwardly calm, felt a primal chill. This city was not in the timeline of ancient Egypt. It felt older, more severe. They cautiously entered the ruins. The air here was strangely cool, almost electrically charged. The stones hummed faintly underfoot. In the center of the city stood the largest structure, a ziggurat-like tower, black as coal, crowned by a massive polished obsidian sphere that seemed to drink the harsh desert light. Inside the tower they found no gold, no sarcophagi, only a large circular chamber. In the middle of the floor was a colossal relief carving, a map. It wasn't a map of the Nile Valley. It was a map of the desert, showing the locations of dozens of other similar obsidian cities, all connected by the network of unseen, buried aqueducts. The civilization had been vast, covering the 97% that was now empty. And then Finch found the central text, carved into a massive basalt stele, written in a proto-hieroglyphic script that he barely understood, whose fundamental message was chillingly clear. Part 3. The Treaty of the Sands. Finch worked feverishly, translating the strange angular script. The text was not a history, but a treaty, or perhaps a warning, left by a people the ancient Egyptians called the Shemsu Hor, the companions of Horus, whom Finch realized were the actual builders of the Nile civilization's true foundation. The story unfolded. Millennia before the dynastic period, the Shemsu Hor were masters of the entire western desert. The Sahara was not a desert then, but a green savanna, a lush lake-filled land they called Ta'ab, the land of the horns, referencing the widespread herds of cattle. The Obsidian Cities were hydrological marvels, designed to manage the unpredictable but abundant rain cycles. They practiced a form of applied meteorology and geology, using the dark, energy-absorbing obsidian structures to interact with the magnetic fields of the earth. They were the Watchers, not of the skies, but of the land's vital forces.
However, a cataclysm came, a massive climate-altering event, likely the true onset of the Holocene African humid period's collapse, which began to turn the savanna to sand. The Shemsu Hor, facing the destruction of their global power base, performed a last, desperate collective act. The stele described the construction of a great geological tool centered at the location Finch called the Obsidian Tower. It was a machine designed to draw the lifeblood of the surrounding continent into a single, defensible artery, the Nile Valley. The concept was simple yet terrifying. Instead of fighting the desertification across millions of square miles, they would accept it and then magnetize the remaining available water. They used their obsidian structures not to nurture, but to repel water away from the surrounding lands, driving the water table deep and forcing surface moisture toward the Great Northern River. The act was described as Ket Naba, the Great Culling. The treaty carved into the stone was an agreement between the fleeing Shemsu Hor and the nascent dynastic Egyptians, led by the legendary King Menezes, whom they had uplifted and taught the arts of writing and stonework. The pact was this: the Shemsu Hor would initiate the Great Culling, creating the green strip of the Nile Valley, sacrificing the 97% for the sake of the 3%. In return, the dynastic Egyptians were sworn to never, under any circumstances, attempt to settle or cultivate beyond a specific geological line, the border of the water's forced influence. The Obsidian Cities would become the keepers, empty sentinels, silent observers of the pact. Should the Egyptians or any future civilization ever attempt to reclaim the desert by means of large-scale irrigation, the obsidian mechanisms sustained by deep earth energy would reverse the process. The magnetic pull on the water would cease, and the Nile Valley itself would be slowly, irrevocably consumed by the surrounding waiting sand. The vast majority of the Shemsu Hor then entered an act of mass ritualistic retreat, burying their cities beneath the newly advancing sand, becoming the legends of the Watchers, the unseen guardians of the Great Culling's terrible price. Part 4. The Price of the Oasis. Finch reread the final lines of the stele. They weren't a blessing, they were a curse. Quote, "We have given you the river, but the land beyond is not dead, it merely sleeps. Disturb the sleep of the Watchers, and the 97% will claim the 3%. The price of your life is the death of the sea without water." He understood now why the villages stopped abruptly, why the ancient farmers never strayed beyond the irrigation canals. It wasn't a lack of engineering skill, it was absolute fear. The Pharaohs knew. They were bound by a sacred ecological covenant. We will live, but only on the terms of the dead.
Finch stood there, the obsidian tower looming over him, a generator of terrible solitude. The entire civilization of the Nile Valley, the breadbasket of the ancient world, the home of the pyramids, was a miracle built on a lie, the deliberate technological murder of the surrounding ecosystem. It was then that Ibrahim screamed. A sound had begun, a low, grinding resonance emanating from the obsidian sphere at the tower's apex. The air grew cold. Sand began to dance, not blown by the wind, but pulled toward the obsidian stones of the city. Ibrahim pointed toward the beautiful blue lake. A disturbance was growing in its center. Not a ripple, but a massive counterclockwise swirl. The water level was dropping, visibly, quickly. "They hear us, Kawaga, the Watchers. We have broken the silence," Ibrahim shouted. Finch knew the terrible implication. He had brought shovels, but the Shemsu Hor's mechanism wasn't powered by steam or electricity. It was powered by the Earth itself, and his presence, his scholarly intrusion, his attempt to map and therefore claim the territory, had activated a centuries-long dormant defense. The Obsidian City was now doing what it was designed to do, reversing the flow. It was beginning to draw the subterranean water table away from the Nile, back into the desert, to resaturate its own dying heart. Finch grabbed his notebook and the translated transcript. There was no time to save his equipment. "We run, Ibrahim. Now. We have angered the drought itself." They fled the dying oasis. As they crested the dune, Finch looked back. The lake was gone, replaced by a churning vortex of black, wet mud. The sound from the tower was deafening, a roar of unleashed geological pressure. They rode back toward the Nile Valley, driven by desperation, pursued by the fastest thing in the desert, thirst. Epilogue: the library and the sandstorm. Dr. Finch made it back to Cairo a broken man, his skin peeling, his eyes haunted. His guides vanished the moment they saw the familiar green smudge of the Nile. He never published the full account. He knew that if the British Colonial Office, or worse, the German or French rivals, found out that the 97% of the desert held a power capable of drying up the Nile, they would descend on the Obsidian Cities with dynamite and greed. They would try to destroy the system, inevitably activating its final, total revenge. Finch only published a small, innocuous paper in the Royal Society's journal, titled "On the Inexorable Geological Determinism of the Western Egyptian Borderlands." It was a dull, scholarly masterpiece that deliberately misinterpreted everything he had seen, citing only environmental and geological reasons for the desert's existence. He kept the basalt transcript in a specially constructed iron box, buried beneath the floorboards of his London home. He became a staunch and vocal opponent of any large-scale irrigation project in Egypt, especially those pushing toward the Western Desert. He spent the remainder of his life arguing against the very idea of reclamation, a lonely, obsessive voice in the booming industrial age. Today, we look at Egypt and wonder why so many people are crowded in such a tiny space. We debate dams and water management and climate change. But the real reason is not the heat or the sand. It is the pact. Somewhere beneath the Great Sand Sea, buried under 1,000,000 tons of sand, sits the Obsidian Tower. It is still humming. The 97% of the empty land is not a mistake of nature, but a deliberate technological sacrifice created to sustain the 3%. And every drop of water drawn from the Nile, every new farm carved a foot too far into the desert fringe, is a vibration in the deep earth, a faint echo that the Watchers, the silent, unseen geological guardians of the Obsidian Eye, are listening. The desert isn't empty because it's dead. It's empty because it is waiting.